Decorating Pages is a podcast dedicated to taking you behind the scenes of the designs of your favorite TV shows and films. Each episode, I'll be sharing design stories from some of Hollywood's most famous sets. Interviews from set decorators, production designers, directors, and actors about creating the look of TV and film, about their design inspirations, and stories that take sets from page to screen. Well, hello there, and welcome to Decorating Pages. I am your host, Kim Wanup. 2 this week. I mean, you guys are lucky. I've never done this. I've never had, I don't think I've ever put out 2 episodes in 1 week. I'm excited. I've got some great people that I have talked to in the last couple of weeks who have some fantastic projects that are all going to be, hoping to get a little gold statue. So, it's that time of year and everybody wants everybody to see their work. And it feels like in Hollywood, it's always FYC season for your consideration because, the springtime and then like early summer and then summer, you have the Emmys, and then fall, you have the Oscars, and early New Year. So it's kind of always FYC out here. I always think it's the funniest thing because when you're in Los Angeles, the billboards are like 85% for TV series or films. Anywhere else in the country, it's like healthcare and restaurants and Jacoby and Myers, things like that. I mean, it's just funny in LA, the importance that is put on advertising for your shows while people drive, which is smart because hell man, I'm in traffic all day long if I'm working. So, anyway, I have another episode today with production designer Erin Magill and her project Dead Ringers that is on Amazon Prime. So I don't know if you've seen it. I had a hard time with it because of the twin thing. Like, I saw Dead Ringers, the movie, in '88, and it freaked me out with Jeremy Irons, and he's a twin, identical twin, and he's like a guy, and he's a gynecologist, and I just remember that one scene. I don't know. And I think because I have identical twins, I hope that they don't ever play these mind games with someone of like switching identities or just, I don't know. They're not good people in these movies, so I don't like it. Rachel Weisz was fantastic. And when you're watching it, you're like, you forget that it's one person playing both roles. I truly believe that you forget it, that it's seamless in the way that they do it and the effects of it. So that in itself is a reason to watch it. But yeah. I told Erin I couldn't really get through it, but hey, what are you going to do? So the DGA did unanimously vote to approve the contract that was sent to them, and now it goes to their members. And I started to read on Deadline some of the things that they got, and everything basically is like groundbreaking. And I'm so jealous that we did not strike 2 years ago. I am just so jealous. I think their biggest thing is they got a 5% increase in the first year of the contract, 4% for the second, 3.5% for the third, additional is 0.5%. Well, I think we got 1. Or maybe we got 3, starting with 3, and then it goes down to 1. So that's cool. Substantial increase for the residuals of dramatic programs made for streaming services. And the result is 76% increase in foreign residuals for the largest platform, so that residuals for a 1-hour episode will now be roughly $90,000 for the first 3 exhibit years. I don't even know what that means. 90,000. I don't know. That's just a number I'm never going to get. So they came up with AI is real and it cannot replace us. That was good. Establishment of the industry's first ever terms and conditions for directors and their teams on non-dramatic, which is variety and reality programs made for streaming. Improve residuals for the first time for associate directors and stage managers. Good for them. It's good for, I get it. I mean, it's great. So directors for features will get paid for soft prep. There was something in here about directors getting paid for here it is. For pay TV and streaming, episodic directors win expanded paid post-production creative rights and gain an additional guaranteed shoot day for 1-hour programs. The first additional added in more than 40 years. So I guess the producers really like the directors, huh? I mean, this is what this says to me. I can't wait to see what they give the actors. I mean, really. And this should be very encouraging for the writers, I would think, if they're giving it to them. I mean, maybe you get this type of thing in relation to what you're asking for. I don't know. It seems like the directors are very happy with this, and it looks like they got a lot. And again, this is streaming. This isn't, every show everywhere. This is just the streaming contracts that were up for negotiation at this point, I believe. So yeah. Well, I guess it wasn't just streaming. I don't know. But the big issue is streaming. Okay. Cool. I'm just jealous. I think I'm a little let down, and I'm jealous. Not that I want them to get less. I want everybody to get what they're due. I'm just so pissed that we didn't strike and show our power and our importance in this industry, and maybe we could have gotten more than the 1% or whatever we got, because it feels like we didn't get much. So yeah. Let's just move on. Let's move on. You know what I binged 4 episodes of last night? You're not going to guess. Jury Duty on Amazon. Because I kept hearing that it was really funny, and it's stupid and it's dumb. But I like the premise. This guy, it goes in for jury duty, and everyone except for him is an actor, and a little bit of crazy, just exceeding what could typically happen in a jury case happens. And so everything's pushed a little bit, not absurdly, so he is on to it, but he does state at one point, this is crazy. I don't know what's going to happen tomorrow because everything here is crazy. So, but I do think that some of these actors who are playing, real people or themselves, I don't know, they're pretty good. There's the one weirdo chick and this old lady who keeps falling asleep, and there's just a very different makeup composite in the jury selection, and I think it's pretty well done. And James Marsden plays himself as an actor who doesn't want to be on jury duty, and is very likable and cute and everything. And I don't know, I'm kind of enjoying it. I'm on episode 4. I think I did 4 last night. So I found Joe Warson is the production designer. I couldn't find the decorator's name yet, but bravo. I mean, it's real LA locations. What they do at Huntington Park. They shot the courthouse, and then they have them staying at the old Sportsman's Lodge in the valley. And it's funny. And they go to Margaritaville at City Walk. So I think it's funny. It's funny enough. It's something light and that I can, 'cause my Jersey Housewives. Oh, is that tonight? Oh, I gotta hurry up and get done. I gotta go. No. Oh, I gotta go watch a reunion. Okay, let's see. Just to briefly tell you, next week, 2 more episodes. Production designer Jamie McCall We talk about season 2 of Schmegadoon. And we talk about season 2 of Only Murders in the Building with production designer Patrick Howe and set decorator Rich Murray. And that was really fun. I know Jamie, and Jamie and I have worked together on Impeachment, and it was really fun to catch up with her. And then to talk to Patrick and Rich, who I don't know, but really love that show and love the look. That was really great too, and talk about New York. And yeah, it's loving talking to all these people. I do. And I worked with Erin Magill just before COVID. We did the movie Moxie together, which is on Netflix and Amy Poehler directed and stars in. So you can check out our work if you'd like. On this episode, I interview production designer Erin Magill about her latest project, Dead Ringers. This remake of the 80s film is a unique approach to the theme of duplicity with a focus on feminine palettes and shapes to create sets that enhance the story. The show's look is a standout feature and really a bold character with stunning sets ranging from high-end Manhattan apartments to modern hospitals. Be sure to visit Erin's website to see how she integrates lighting and color and architecture to further elevate the storytelling. Her website is erinmagill.com. So I hope you enjoy. You know when you get that.
Yes. It reminds me of some things from Dead Ringers, so it's very apropos.
Yeah.
I love it.
I was just, again, looking at your site because you have such fantastic photos on there. And then I thought to myself, well, shit, did I miss it? Is Dead Ringers modern day? Or is it the 80s?
We are.
Because your palette is very 80s, I would say, right?
Well, a lot of, yeah. Are we in it? Are we starting?
Yeah, I can start. I mean, I can edit around whatever we talk about. I can edit around. So yeah.
No, of course. Yeah. I guess I would say it was very much. It was set in present day. Yeah. It was supposed to be set, and in the sense that we were gonna. But that was always, I would say, time was probably only important in the sense of maybe the latest technology in what's going on in probably more the lab and the kind of technology and genetics and that kind of stuff. But I will say, because it was a question, because we were prepping and shooting in the summer of 2021, so it was like peak Delta wave in New York here, and so that was always the thing of course, also being in a hospital was like, well, are we embracing COVID or, not? So that, but very early on, it was kind of it was like, we're just going to, not ignoring it in this way, just, it's not necessarily relevant to this story that is very specific in a certain medical world. But definitely, I think because of the original film, Cronenberg's film, that is, very distinctly that, like, in this late 80s kind of look and vibe going on in New York. And I think that really played well at the time for that film into the kind of body horror and psychological thriller that's going on. Yeah. So that there was, I would say there were bits of that I think fundamentally I was absolutely trying to pay homage to. And then there were certain things that I think were really interesting the more my research started, I could just cyclically, I think you can see a lot of the kind of postmodernism of that time has kind of been brought back now in different ways. Not, some of the shapes, not necessarily maybe some of the outrageous colors from the 80s. But that was definitely something that, yes, I would say we were trying to bring back a bit, but not, it was more, I guess I would say it was more always in a way homage to the original and to the kind of psychological thriller aspect of it, and less like we're trying to be set in the 80s, if that makes sense.
I feel like the design of for their apartment is so feminine. with all
Oh,
of
great.
the curves and making it less rigid and everything. I mean, even like the brass on the staircase and like
Yeah.
the windows and the arches of the doors and the beds even rounded and everything. And was that conscious of like because they're twins, like a perfect circle? Was that I'm wondering if there's
It,
like that
there was a lot
imagery
of
in there.
reasons. Yeah. I would say a large amount of reasons that we were combining. One, I would say, and I think just the way I work that you kind of know from this, and I think especially with a project like this that was, on the surface level, here's these twins who are gynecologists and are fantastic at their job, and it's in New York. And Alice had, when she rewrote it, reimagined this adaptation, we were going to play into, yes, they're British. And she had this amazing, like 20-page backstory that she gave me.
Oh,
of
that's fantastic.
Actually, it was amazing, but it was a dream of like all the main characters, and kind of actually it was from their birth, which was really amazing just to read and really interesting. Of again, all those, it was funny because she was, this was her first time as a showrunner, and she was, like when I would ask her certain things about a wallpaper, her opinion, she's like, I'm not the visual one. And I would tell, I'm like, no, you I was like, you might not think you are, but she writes with such beautiful layered detail into the specificity of her characters in this way that's like, you might not understand that, but you are writing a visual world.
Right.
Like you're giving us a lot to play with. So with that in mind, there was these conversations between her and me and Sean Durkin, the director of the first block, of just kind of, I think, again, on this surface level that they've, they are the best, they are the best at what they do, on top of the fact that they are twins, this kind of freak, amazing thing. And they've worked their way in New York. And there's this certain idea that Alice and I would talk about of just, this idea that they're from, they were from a working class family, worked their way up to attain this goal. And so, getting that apartment on the Upper West Side or the Upper East Side was kind of, what's this iconic kind of New York thing. And so our exterior was, of course, a location that we found on the Upper West Side. And it kind of had this beautiful kind of classic New York lobby that we were going to use. It was very, so it's like Italian Rococo kind of, I'm not sure remembering how much you really see of it. But so knowing that we were then, of course, building the apartment and that elevator, which was, a lot of very ornate and gilded and a lot of deep, dark woods. But I kind of knew, I'm like, well, that's not their space though. And that kind of then lent itself in our conversations to then also take this idea of, Art Deco, which I think is very associated with a lot of, architecture in New York, or iconic kind of New York things. And so I said, okay, Art Deco, which is very iconic New York, has lots of feminine shapes, will allow us to use a lot of, I think, reflective things, textures that we were hoping to use in mirrors, as kind of like, we'll start with that elevator and use that Art Deco as a bit in how we started some like the columns out. I guess these kind of like built-in sort of column looking pilaster things on the side of the elevator, and to then kind of start to get a little more modern as you go out more into the communal space, and hints of that throughout the apartment. But that was just this bigger picture level of, I'd say, the New York feeling, the wealth feeling, and then of course this ways that we were wanting it to feel feminine. But also the biggest thing was really I would say feminine, and reinterpreting it, because I think there's such this distinct look from the original film that was inspiring, that I thought really was this great mixture of a lot of, this kind of, okay, it's very, very of the moment of that time, of very like, it's very, very blue and sharp, and everything is that postmodern vibe. And I knew that, okay, we're not gonna, I think sometimes, because I've done other projects where it's like, okay, they're supposed, there's a sinister side to them. And you don't necessarily want to do the most, to me, obvious, like, it's not just going to be white and concrete and everything sharp. And so it was kind of, how do we find that interesting balance of something that feels like this certain level of socioeconomic status they got to, it feels like these women would have paid someone to probably design this home because their entire life is their work. They're not
They don't have time
concerned
for
with
this.
yeah. And so it was like they've paid someone to design this home to them. It's a bit of a status symbol for them because they care about, this. It's another mask that they're kind of wearing. And so that led to I'd say certain elements of the space, and then elements that we dug into in terms of talking a lot with Alice again about, they're most comfortable at work. So what ways can we also take a bit of that hospital idea and that doctor mentality to kind of influence the way that this space was in this kind of cold and sterile, but everything's built in because it's about, even though the form might follow and be very pretty, it's really about function for them. And the idea that I knew in the scripts there was a lot of scenes of them eating, and this way
She's
that
always
Alice
eating.
really wanted to.
I feel like she's like
eating.
Brad Pitt in like Ocean's 11. She's
Yes.
constantly eating the
Yes.
Elliot. So I noticed that too. I also feel like your design of that apartment was realistic in the sense that it wasn't huge. Like it wasn't like a massive apartment. It's like a decent size, big for New York, but a decent size apartment for two people. Like there wasn't an abundance, which makes it look more real. When you see like gigantic dining rooms or whatever, you're like, oh, that's a set. They didn't like,
Thank you. I appreciate that because I think that's always, at least for me, that's always something that I'm concerned with and thinking about. And I know our, Alice and our Sean, everyone was concerned about that. And I really, I said, I know there's ways that we can do this. And I think that also makes sense for who they are. And as much as, you're trying to match certain things that we were trying to match in terms of this upstairs balcony or the lobby and whatnot, I think the kind of way we went about this, a bit of that open floor plan that made sense to me for a lot of the action that I knew that was going to happen in the series, again, allowed us to kind of keep it contained. And then the biggest thing was really actually when I first got the scripts, there was so many scenes in each of Alice had originally written it, each of them had their own bathroom. And there was a lot of scenes of them back and forth in their bathroom. So that was like one of the very first things I said in a meeting with the two of them, which I was like, let's have a Jill and Jill. And this idea that was just like, this really, I think, lends to, sure, on some level, someone's going to be like, these sisters, they share. But I think we realized very quickly, and a lot of the things that happen, them sharing a bathroom is like the least.
Yeah. I think that's totally believable. There's a lot of other unbelievable shit in here. I totally believe they shared a bathroom.
Yes. Yeah. Yes. I'll just say in the beginning, there was like some questions and I was like, no, I really think again, if it's, but of course, playing in that in a fun way, also knowing what was going to happen with like, when when Beverly starts this relationship and I will, that placement of, they're going to have these pocket doors that can see through each other and all of these very strategic mirror placements because of the shots that different directors were planning with the DPs and see through the shower. And just, again, how many ways can we show someone kind of, I think really not having any boundaries whatsoever with their sister.
So the apartment was a build and part of the birthing institute was a build and the hospital, the first hospital?
Yes. So the first thing we built actually was, Westcott Memorial, which is our made up name for our, the first hospital that they're working in. It was kind of inspired like by Mount Sinai Lenox Hill. So that OBGYN wing, we built that. We were a little on location where I think you end up seeing a bit in the final cut of like the covered walkway across a street in Midtown. There's a bit of that, but otherwise that was a complete build, that wing, which
that's a lot.
It was. It was a lot, and then so we built that because we did the first, it is a block of 3, and so that was the first build, and then we moved into the apartment, and then obviously once the apartment, kind of halfway with that, knowing the stage space we had too, I was basically trying to figure out what pieces of the Westcott Memorial I could reconfigure to make for our birthing center as I was coming up with that. And originally, I will say, this was also, again, during that, because there was a lot of, this was really, strict COVID rules and things in the city. So we were getting hit kind of left and right with, I'd say, a very limited amount of time to build and get that ready too. And like, originally scripted
what was your prep? What was your prep for?
10 whole weeks.
10 weeks. Ooh. Yikes.
Yeah.
It doesn't seem enough for everything that you built there, but you did it.
No.
Congrats.
Yes, thank God. I will say my brilliant supervising art director, Marcy Mudd, could not have done it without her. And very thankfully, she brought on her brilliant construction and scenic team from Succession that she had worked with. And without those guys, yes, it would have. Yeah, they all worked very hard in the summer of 2021, which I think no one quite anticipated originally. I think that we would be working every weekend, but
everyone I talk to works weekends now, so it sucks.
I know.
Yeah.
Well, and this is what I was going to say. That was crazy because they had originally thought that the lab would be an entire build as well, and so when that was in the way that the schedule was too, we kind of early on were looking, we knew we wanted the atrium of this, like we knew we needed essentially this to get that, that was, I would say overall, that was kind of always this big challenge of they're already at this certain level of, peak where they are, but then they're going to get money from that next level of real wealth.
Right.
And then they're already at, say, the best hospital in New York. And then what does this thing look like once they've gotten that, multiple million, 15 million to build their center. And so really defining that. And so we kind of knew like, okay, we need something that feels the grandeur of that kind of lobby of the birthing center, which that obviously the very cool, kind of organic walkways and staircases of that,
and that ceiling,
like white marble. Yeah, the ceiling, the whole crazy ceiling thing. I always just think of the wood in a way that I loved, but that's actually, so that was a location. At the time, we were very excited because no one else had used it, but of course, because of all of the post work in ours. 2 years later, it was like, I've seen this now in other things, but at the time, we were very excited because
no one had used it. I don't, because I was. That's one of my questions. Wait. If you built that, because I don't know if I've seen it. So I
guess they used an aspect of it. Maybe you didn't. I mean, I think we obviously were using it for a very specific reason, and in our way. But I think a room of it, someone told me Billions had used or something. But I don't know if you've seen it.
Sorry, Jim. I don't watch it.
We loved it because it was, of course, it had this amazing kind of organic, feminine feeling to it. Also very, very open and airy and different than everything I was doing.
It was it was definitely a nice contrast and more stark. And I think your build sets then had a very nice flow into that language and still like repeating that throughout all those like operating rooms and birthing rooms, and that was scary.
And I would say what's interesting is, I think while of course there was a bit of a order shooting wise and the characters, we knew I was working on their apartment first. I was always, of course, as I was researching and really looking into a lot of current OBGYN wings and kind of coming up for the language with what was that kind of more antiquated system of and bureaucracy and
the viewing rooms. And did you go? I guess it was COVID. You probably couldn't have gone in.
No, we couldn't. But I did. There was a lot of. Obviously, besides old design books and going way back, because that was the thing that was interesting to me too, was kind of learning the history of when these specific wings I think just the evolution of the design of it and really learning like, oh, this is really the reason any of these wings, a lot of them hospitals started to have them was in the 80s when someone basically realized they could make money off it. It was never necessarily again about women's healthcare. It was like, oh, if we make this wing and slap up, some feminine looking wallpaper, because of course, looking back at a lot of them, I was obsessed with like, why is there this little floral, wallpaper here, but not somewhere else? And it was all just about making money. And okay, if we do this, it's, again, it wasn't necessarily about the research into the healthcare and the way that it was supposed to be done. And so that was something, again, that we were kind of, I don't know if you can see as much in the final edit, but the kind of way we were trying to kind of, I think, shove patients together or have spaces feel like, this was maybe this room and 20 years ago, but now it's been turned into this part of it. And it wasn't, even though it might be the top hospital, maybe they're building out some new wing that'll be open in 20 years kind of a thing. But knowing that, and then knowing we were going to the birthing center, I was also always kind of thinking this idea a bit of course, there was a little of the original film. There was some of looking into these kind of bespoke birthing centers. And I think in general, in a way, I will say I also was a bit of this, I'd say, for good or bad, the kind of, the wing, the women's club that was around for a while?
No.
It's I'd say there's just a look that I feel like that is the archway, or like that looks that shape of like a gravestone, or just this kind of very feminine palette that I feel like has kind of permeated culture in the last like 5 years. It's a certain look of a type of furniture, or a certain look that feels like, oh, it's probably frankly as a certain generation of women now have money and have their own job to, so it's like we're gearing towards whether it's Gen Z or millennials that can buy things. And it's just this like very feminine look that in a way I'm like, and not to judge them, but it was just very interesting to see in these bespoke centers, like, oh, is that what they assume a mom wants to see? Or is there actually like looking into the research of like, what would she actually want the room to feel like versus like, are we just saying this is what it would feel like? And again, with all that in mind, it was also, okay, it's these sisters and then the Parkers who they got the money from. And so I was also always interested in kind of bringing some of the textures and shapes we see from both their worlds to then the birthing center to me, that kind of, would hopefully make sense that, again, their personal touches in a way that to me was like, they probably weren't as interested in their house, but they're far more interested when someone was maybe showing them plans for a birthing center of like some shape or something that they're interested in.
I kept thinking, because having worked with you, how immersed you get in research and how you like kind of like beautiful mind yourself in your room, in your office. And I really kept thinking, oh, I'm glad I did Moxie with her and not this, because I just kept thinking of you having like gynecological tables and like feminine artwork. Like, I don't know. I was just like, whew, thank God.
Well, it's interesting because I think, I would say in a way that I think you'll appreciate, like, as much as there was a lot of that in this really great way, I think it was a really good exercise for me, again, because going back to like their house, and the medical spaces to a degree of, they are what they are. There's not a lot of, as we like the layering, like something we were doing in Moxie. We're like, and the house, Alice and I spoke a lot again about how it was like these two, they're not the only place we were going to show any personality at all was really going to be in their bedrooms. And if that, and it was going to be minimal because these aren't people that really expose themselves that way. And there's not going to be a ton of sentimentality all over the walls and layered in this way. And so it was this really, while I did, have my massive boards of images and connecting all of those things to me in a way and whittling them down, it became much more about those kind of like, I think the bones of the space or the built-in and kind of, okay, what are the shapes or the textures and the colors and getting in with, knowing. I remember telling Shannon kind of early on as I was
your decorator,
my decorator, Shannon Finnerty, brilliant, that as we were getting into kind of the house and their apartment, and I was talking to Alice and Sean about it, I was like, this, I really don't think it's gonna, I was like, this is gonna be about, I was like, doesn't mean it's gonna be cheap, but it was like, this is gonna be very much about this like custom tight palette and a lot of these built-in things, and more about the fabrics and the marble that we're choosing, and not about finding necessarily a ton of these specific pieces, other than yes, the bed or this. It was just like, it's going to be about really
did you build both beds, or were they
no, so the Beverly's beautiful bed, there was this one beautiful image that is from like 1930s India, this Art Deco bed. I actually remember seeing later Nightmare Alley, that film from, they very much like, I think just completely copied the thing, but it was this beautiful kind of
I saw the research on your board on your website. You have your boards on there, and I saw that inspiration image you had.
And that one was really for us, again, because it was this idea that, Beverly, this is like sanctuary. She is the more, I think in general, also calm, collected, romantic. So this idea of kind of this very romantic, beautiful bed, that Alice really loved that right away. And Shannon, thankfully, because I think at one point we were maybe contemplating building it, but we definitely didn't have the time. And so she found that on Cherish, and then and then we painted it to kind of fit in with the rest of the room. And then she did a beautiful kind of custom drapery that we did, that we kind of loved the connection with, again, hospital kind of drapes and that. And then the piece of artwork that we have, basically two, and really in their house. I mean, there's probably a few little things you might say, but
there's hardly any artwork in there. You graphically have big prints, but not really artwork.
Yeah, and so that one above the bed, and then this one above the fireplace, were both by this artist, Jessie Mockren, who's I've been obsessed with her work for quite a while. I think it's beautiful. She's LA based and is at this great gallery, Night Gallery, and she does these amazing oil paintings of that are always, they're kind of inspired by old masters, and then she does this very much like feminist kind of reinterpretation of them.
Oh, wow.
And there was a few of them that I had early on, just kind of mixed into each of the sisters' boards in terms of more, I'd say, like kind of palette. But Alice was always very drawn to them too. And so I kind of, at a certain point when we were talking again about like, there's not going to be like, I mean, I think we maybe had a picture of them with their parents, maybe back on a console table in the dining room. It was very, there's not going to be like, again, because I think of this very kind of cathedral, this kind of feeling of that we wanted to, I think, create a kind of the tension and the psychological thriller aspect of what's going on. We, I think we were just very conscious of like, what is going to be on these walls? Because if we see it, it's going to make an impact. And so that's what led us to those two pieces from Jessie, who was very kind of her to let us use.
And then episode 2, whose vagina is it?
Yes, that was such a, God, I loved reading that dinner scene. It really was just the most fun
that dinner scene was so uncomfortable. And I have to be honest, I only watched 3 episodes. I could barely get through this. I just found it so uncomfortable. The whole series, I just found so uncomfortable. The whole birthing thing and babies, I was crying my eyes out and I was like, and then I was like, I don't want to, there's something about, because I have identical twins, I don't want to see how this could go wrong. I don't know. I just don't want to see how
I can understand that.
Mind games they might fuck each other with. And I don't know if I can get through this. So, but I did my homework for you, but I will not continue on. Let's just say that.
Here's the thing. I completely understand the amount of friends I have and like colleagues that have been like, you didn't tell me. I'm like, yes, but I think actually, to Alice's credit, that's a bit of That's her brilliance. I think
it is.
If people that know Cronenberg films or that I think are in that and kind of know, like, you expect to see some bodily, gross, awful thing, and I think a lot of, while it does get maybe a little more intense towards the end. I mean, I think that's the brilliance of what she's just trying to show in that first episode. It's like, birth is a very complicated, messy, painful thing. It's not some perfect little thing that, someone goes into, the water doesn't break and then the baby pops out and nothing happened in between. I think we normally see.
I saw Dead Ringers. I think I was probably 10 or 11, and it fucked me up.
Oh my God.
Well, no, I had no parental guidance. I was just watching whatever was on, like, HBO or whatever. So, yeah. And that, Jeremy Irons, that's a mindfuck.
Yeah.
That was...
Yeah.
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 So I knew what I was getting into, in a sense of, like, I think I know what's going to happen.
But I know it is not a light and breezy kind of turn your head off. Is
that house though in episode 2?
Yes. So the Parker State. Oh wait,
that was sorry.
So
yes, what a house.
And the vagina painting you were asking about. So yes, the Parker Estate, again, that was a really, don't worry, I will definitely tell you about the vagina painting.
Oh, no, it's all right.
So no, it's a good, I actually, I think it's a fun story of how we approach that.
Yeah. Clearance.
Definitely not clearance. So kind of what I said, I think, it was always going to be this interesting thing of when we got to the place of kind of knowing what the twins' apartment was going to be, and then we're like, okay, but then they're going to essentially this Sackler-esque family, one of their, just one of the members of the family, probably one of that member's many homes. So like this level of wealth, and as I already mentioned, and too, when you have a certain amount of prep time and a certain amount of money, there's, and this isn't even, yes, it's an important character, but it's not, there was no, we're going to build this house. And so initially, I think with just some of those production restraints, Sean and I, again, that first director, we were really thinking a lot about, this, I think kind of the first idea of just, it really has to be about the bones of a house. Cause I was worried with Shannon as well. And Shannon was with our time of, how are we really, again, this can't just be someone with a restoration hardware couch. Like just this level of, it can't be all about the dressing. It's got to be about eccentric. Maybe this awe-inspiring house. But I will say, so that early on, we were having a really hard time finding something in the zone, in our 30-mile zone, that really was going to feel right. And one of our last things we finally saw was this amazing old house on Long Island that actually this architect had in the 30s that this very weird, it's odd because it's this round living room with this huge glass window. That room was basically apparently an inspiration for the Rainbow Room at the Rockefeller Center, and he had helped design the UN. And so even though I'd say a lot of these things weren't necessarily in the end you could see, they made a lot of sense to me. Like we learned there was this beautiful sculpture on the wall that had always been sold with the house that was based on a painting that this French artist had done in the pool when he was escaping Nazi Germany in the 40s. So there was just this kind of, I think, history to it that felt very old money, and that generational wealth to me is like the kind of bones of the house. But then with that, Shannon, thankfully, formed an amazing relationship with this gallery in New York called R. And they mainly have, these unique furniture pieces that are art. And we essentially worked out a fabulous deal with them where, I feel like they might've given us maybe $2 million worth of pieces that we were able to. It's a little sad. You can't necessarily see a lot of them that breaks, Shannon and I's heart of it, but like the rug that I can't remember
the
if
vagina
it's the guy
rug?
or the trans. No, there's a rug. There's a rug that during the game one guy gets rolled up in. That's like that's this Haas Brothers rug, and there's all these other
look like a vagina.
Yeah, well, I believe it was a mastodon, but a
mastodon. Oh no!
I think that's the one we ended up using.
It was pink. It was all like pinks and like.
It was. It did. To be fair, it did have a bit of. I will say there was, without question, there are vaginal influences throughout
the house,
the film.
Yeah.
For everywhere throughout the entire series, but like one of the things that I do wish you could see a little more when they're at the desk with Rebecca, and she's kind of talking to them at the end of that weekend. Her desk is this beautiful, this designer Wendell Castle, and it's this like insanely beautiful wood organic carved desk that to me was always this tie to that kind of atrium that we see later. So I wish we could have seen that a little more. But yes, the idea that they're kind of this woman, at least specifically in the family, is clearly a collector of art, of causes, of wives. And that was kind of the way it was like, and because I think those scenes, some of them are very funny. I think there was something comical in a lot of even though they're very expensive and unique and worth something, a lot of the pieces, it was like there's something I think in the way that they were going to frame them, hopefully, that kind of added to the tone of what was going on in the scene.
I would say on a whole, I don't think they stayed wide long enough and or for introductions of scenes. It's like when in the beginning of that episode when she's at the desk with the two women, I actually thought they were in their apartment. Like probably because I don't know the story yet because it's in reverse order. But I would have to say in general, looking at your website and seeing the sets versus what I saw on screen, I would say they didn't properly give a wide in storytelling for the sets. So I'm just telling you that. I'm telling you that because your website has fantastic photos on it, and I was like, well, where the fuck was this room? Like, where was this nook? Like, where was this? You can't help editing. You can't. That's the bummer of it. You can't help the editing.
And to be I will say, I mean, there was a certain amount of time to shoot, and then you factor in that, of course, Rachel is playing both parts. So as much as
right,
it's a heavy script there, I mean, they just had, I of course, we barely had time. So it wasn't, it's definitely not a show where I was able to, hang out at all, barely, I open a set and have to leave. And so, but I agree with you.
But as a viewer, you're missing out as a viewer of these things too, to set up, like to give the viewer a second to consume, like, where are we now? Okay. I feel like they hopped into the close-up a lot.
And you do, I do think I'd be curious what you saw. I do think by 3, when the center is, I do feel like
the center, they gave that
center, and you start to see their world too. I know you're not going to watch it. I will say episode 4, it's a bit of a bottle episode in their apartment with their parents, so you see that a lot more. But I'm with you. I think I wish, and it's not. It's of course there's a level of bias of just
we all wish teams to keep it wide.
Our teams, of course, our teams work always. But I do think it would have benefited I think the notion of who the Parkers were a little more, and just that sense of space, because it is bouncing around. And so of course, back to the vagina painting, because the house was a location, but then the dinner scene itself was, I think, scripted for like 3 days. So that was something that we always knew. Nice. Also was like, this is going to have to be a build, because of course, this is a meal for 3 days that they need to be able to control. And so that one was, to me too, just knowing that we had built that. I do wish we had seen a little wider on some of that I think we really made a concerted effort to kind of use certain aspects of the bones of the house above to connect to it.
Yeah.
whether there was certain colors or textures or, the opening to this kind of skylight rock wall or our Japanese garden. And just, I just think there are certain elements of all those tying together that, yes, would have given a little bit more of a sense of place for that whole weekend that they were having at that house. But the vagina painting, yes. So very importantly, which led to, all these other kind of collected pieces. As I spoke to Alice early on, it was, you've got this hilarious joke part and said, it can't just be that in the room,
Right.
We have to try to balance it. And so obviously naturally I was like, well, that obviously lends itself to, the queen of vaginal reference paintings, Georgia O'Keeffe, that most people would think about, I think.
Right.
And so thankfully they were very easy to work with, and Alice, and she chose there was a few that I thought would be a good mix, and she chose her favorite and just kind of balanced the room. But the one itself, we ended up finding on Etsy this photographer's very close-up photo of a rose.
Wow.
that we bought from them in the rights, and then our scenic painters painted, we blew it up and they painted it.
Oh, that's fantastic.
They then painted it with, some references of kind of, smooth it out a little more here. And that was kind of here's our abstract version of.
Oh, that was great.
Right? I thought it was pretty, I wish I could remember some of the discussions we had about how we were going to get that done. But
well, I always love, I look at it with Moxie. I mean, I always look on Etsy. I always try to look for smaller independent artists and try to give them a little push or recognition for hard work. So yeah, I'm happy to hear that. I'm sure they were too.
Yes, that was the other thing too. I will say, Shannon and her team, I can't remember now which episode. Oh, maybe it is that episode when Greta, the assistant, when they're away, she's collecting. And I can't remember, is that episode, did they show her, do we go to her studio, her house and that?
Yes.
And I haven't put those on my website yet. But Shannon and her team did that. That's probably the ones that's most kind of like to something we did for Moxie. It was so layered and so amazing in terms of this kind of artist studio space that we created in the basement of, we were playing the idea that she lives at home with her dad, but has this studio basement downstairs and is this artist. And I really wish we could have seen more of the layering and the collecting, and because Shannon and her team just did outstanding job in that space.
Can you tell me what she does with all that shit, or is she making artwork?
Oh, yes. She's making, yes. And I understand to a degree they didn't want to fully show yet, because it's a bit of building what's going on here with this person, but I believe it's either the
she was interesting.
I can't remember. It was originally 7 and it was made into 6 in the final edit, and so that's why I get a little confused. But I think in 5 or 6 you do see Greta's art show, and so it makes a little more sense of where all this stuff is.
At first I'm like, is she trying to clone them? What the fuck is going on with this?
I know.
But yeah, that does make sense now. When you get to designing the women's center and you have the sort of iconic red in there that you brought into this series, what design adjustments did you have to make for that? Did you have to make any adjustments for the red lighting and the red wardrobe against your set?
Well, yeah. It was interesting. So early on, there was obviously that kind of conversation of, okay, the iconic stuff from the original film and those scrubs. And so it was kind of decided with Carrie Langerman, our brilliant costume designer, Carrie's going to, Alice and Sean and Carrie were yes, we're going to pursue in the birthing center, wanting to still do something, our updated version of this in a red. And so when I knew that, I was, of course, a little okay, there was, and this was very early on when we were still kind of, I always viewed it a bit as the pieces started to come together, we had this atrium, and then I knew we were going to be building essentially a birthing suite, maybe a bit of a hallway attached to that. And then there was also the operating room and Elliot's personal lab. I kind of started to view it as, okay, there's this atrium and birthing suite that are maybe a little more towards like in a way towards what Beverly's interest was, and this little more above surface, leaning more like bespoke spa, hospital, hotel kind of thing. Mm-hmm. And then as we get into more maybe operating room, it starts to basically be this crossover down into the lab where things can be a little more leaning into this, I'd say, Elliot, her personality, the idea of what's kind of what we end up knowing is going on in her, then even more private lab of just kind of, I think, leaning into that definite more like stylistic, psychological horror thing that's going on. Mm-hmm. But part of it was, while I knew in the operating room, Laura, our DP that took over for Laura Marians, who took over for the second, we were having a lot of great conversations about the shapes and where she was going to be lighting from, knowing she was definitely going to, play with the lighting, turning red at certain points. And so I kind of knew that our palette there was going to be more of just, again, it was about the shapes and giving her the ability to light and shadow and have those dramatic effects.
Yeah.
And then, again, in the lab, and part of basically this big moment was when we kind of realized, again, with our schedule and time and money, the rest of what was supposed to be, this, I'd say, a little bit more the front-facing part of the lab, not Elliot's private sneaky room, where the party is, was just like, there's no way we're going to have time to build that. I don't like, and so thankfully, again, at the time, I kind of, knowing a lot of the shapes we were already working with, that's when I brought them out to, I had found, I was less interested in the iconic TWA airport itself, but more this convention center and hotel that has been built attached that kind of takes from the original beautiful, iconic airport. And it was, when we went there, it was just kind of perfect in this way that I was like, oh, they have these amazing terrazzo floors, and the convention center itself had like these terrazzo countertops on like metal push carts for catering, just these things that again felt just like, no, someone probably wouldn't have that in a hospital, but just a bit more stylized that kind of made sense for this birthing center space for us. Yeah. And that one room that we kind of treat as the lab with the big screens, Laura and I had talked a lot about, and we really liked the kind of the overlooking kind of conference breakout room that's technically what it was, that was looking down, that we're kind of like, oh, here's the lab, and the idea that kind of maybe Elliot's space is more up here. And there was just a lot of, I think, built-in texture and grandeur there that kind of felt to me that the way that Laura and Karina Evans, our wonderful director for that episode, were talking, that I felt like these things would really connect, I thought, visually in a way that would give us that, like, hey, I believe they got 15 million or more to build this thing. And
because too, in hospital design, like, lights are integrated, like spaces, cleaning corners and all that, like, it all makes sense as a design for a hospital. It totally works. So I was just wondering if even with wardrobe, like all the red and everything, of like, okay, did they want it to pop? Obviously, I think they wanted it to pop, so then your design had to follow with that.
Yeah, ours was it really became more about, I think, the shapes and the proportions for me, in terms of the curves or the kind of, a column in an interesting way, and the way that, again, things that we were building that Laura could light in a way that might seem a little organic, futuristic, 10% more. But honestly, I did a lot of, besides the bespoke thing, I honestly looked a lot into hospital and medical design, frankly, in Europe and a lot of other the countries that
other
have
countries
other countries that have socialized medicine, and some interesting, even in China and Japan and Korea, and a lot of things that are like, oh, this, again, that kind of, for America, I would say it seems a little futuristic, but the rest of the world, actually not. Unsurprisingly.
Last question, because I know you got to go. Were you involved with any of that intro with the model making?
No, but it was based loosely on our birthing center, of course. I mean, the idea is that was, their initial model to get funding.
Mm-hmm.
And that was also, there was the whole part of, there was a whole scene that was shot originally actually for other fundraisers that ended up not being used in the final edit. So, but that model was kind of created in theory for that by our Sarah, whose name I'm blanking on, or her last name I'm blanking on right now, who was our genius assistant set decorator for specifically, she worked on that, but she worked on all of our medical stuff and really became the go-to expert on kind of, especially when we were really trying to differentiate between, okay, this hospital is great, but if their thing's going to look like this, what could we pull off at the birthing center? And she was our genius medical gal for that.
You need someone to expertise things when you get into that. Like, you need a button guy or like a medical girl.
Yeah.
Or like, you need.
Well, of course. And what was interesting too, I will say, when we got to the point of the birthing center, it was interesting because we did, we met along the way with a few different experts in terms of the genetics research or what some of these things might look like. And Sarah and her connection did have to tread lightly with certain companies because of technically where the storyline goes and what Elliot starts to do and kind of breaking, frankly, some FDA and ethical laws. Right. It was like, well, they would have this, but we can't necessarily use that the same way, we always deal with, certain things with maybe alcohol companies or, certain things. It made it an interesting, like, well, shoot, this just not in a way that I think I would have thought of, I think in the beginning, thinking like, oh yeah, this is someone breaking the law medically. And okay,
we're just gonna use your shit to incubate this. That's cool, right?
Yeah. Yeah. So like, how can we, oh shoot. Okay. So that was an interesting, problem to solve that I was not anticipating in the beginning. I'll say that.
Have you seen anything lately that's inspiring? Anything you're watching?
What have I watched that's been inspiring? I will say because I'm always a sucker for a bit of a what feels apocalyptic, like Hunger Games. Like I started watching that Silo show.
Oh, you're like the third person who told me to watch that this week. Like this week, everyone's watching it. I got to get on it.
And I know it's based on a book that I didn't read. There is a clear, whether or not, I guess I say this because I'd be interested to know if someone who like read the book feels like, people can get so particular.
No.
As I know from Cronenberg fans that we were like, who's going to get mad if we do this or don't do this or whatever. But I commend, like, it is every detail, every layer of from sets to costume. Like it is a clear vision that's clearly all on the same page. That at least, for the level of just making me like, I'm immersed and I need to know who built the silo. I respect them for that.
Is that on Apple? Am I right?
Yes.
Like I'm literally like the notes above your notes right now is I talked to this production designer Tracy Collins and the Silo. That's the only note I have.
Yeah, it's pretty. I was It's in terms of it's always true, really world building on the level that's like, oh, okay, like they did it. They did a good job. I'm impressed. I'm going to keep watching because I need to know who built it and why. In the context of this story, it's a whole big thing. The people that live there don't know why.
So you're in New York?
Yes, just for
It was great to catch up with Erin and talk about this weirdo, very weird project of hers, which I think design-wise is such a challenge, and really taking on this somewhat of a classic movie done in the 80s and trying to redesign it. It's hard. You're gonna get compared, and I think her use in design of making it more feminine was very successful. So I hope you check that out and maybe get further than I did, because I couldn't do it. I'm a big baby. I couldn't do it. I mean, I kind of know the ending because I saw the movie in the 80s, so I didn't blow it for myself, you know? But yes, great to catch up with Erin, and yeah, I don't know. So yeah, next week, Jamie McCall talking about second season of Schmegadoon, and Only Murders in the Building production designer Patrick Howe and set decorator Rich Murray talk about that second season, which are both up for Emmy contention. So I hope you got an earful. I'm Kim Monup for Decorating Pages.